In this video, we're going to talk about the differences between base 5 and base 10. Now, I've got some different kind of blocks here. Alright, remember that I'm adding some yellow ones in here that will represent our base 5, and we still have our base 10 blocks that we started with to begin with. Alright, let's think about base 10. So in base 10, we had the first place was 10 to the 0. The second place is 10 to the first. The third place was 10 to the third. Okay, so in base 5, the first place would represent 5 to the 0, 5 to the first, and 5 to the second. So let's think about what these numbers mean. So 5 to the 0 power represents 1, because any number to the 0 power is 1, just like it is in base 10. Then 5 to the first power is just plain old 5. 5 to the second power would be 5 times 5. Remember, the exponent tells you how many times you multiply the base together. The exponent's the small number, the base is the large. 5 times 5 is 25. And then I'm going to go one step further, because we didn't actually show, I've got 10 to the third there. So we make mistakes. Teachers make mistakes too. You just correct them as you go along. 10 to the third would be over here. Alright, 10 to the third I didn't show you, but that would be 10 of these flats stacked up. So it would basically be a cube that's 10 by 10 by 10 tall. So for a 5 to the third power, it would be represented as 5 times 5 times 5, or 125. So let's take a look at what these represent. So this one is still a unit. The rod now is represented with, there we go, you can see the markings in between. The rod is represented with, there, that may be easier. The rod is represented with 5 units now instead of 10. The flat is represented with 5 of these rods now instead of 10 of those rods. So it's 5 rods of 5, and a rod is 5 units. Okay? So it's the same thing. And then if we looked at 5 to the third power, 5 to the third power would be 125. Okay. Now, so let's talk about converting in between those numbers. Okay? So let's look at converting numbers to and from base 5. So let's talk about the number 22 base 10. Now, oops, we didn't zoom back out, did we? Sorry. Okay, so 22 base 10, note that I have the little subscript to represent the base, but we really just represent base 10 because we use it every day with no base, with no subscript down below it. But just so that we know, since we are converting in bases, I am going to use a base 10 subscript. So what we want to do is we want to find out what this number looks like in base 5. Now, with different bases, what you have to remember is that the base tells you how many digits there are that are represented in that particular number system. So in base 10, we have 10 digits, which are represented 0 through 9. because we don't have anything larger than that, because all numbers after that are made up with combinations of those digits. So we look at things, so in base 5 then, we're going to be looking at 5 digits, which would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So basically, I can never have a number in base 5 that's represented by anything larger than 4. Okay? Now think about that. Because when I get to the next piece of my base, see here, when I have a base 10, a rod, when I get to 10 of these units, I don't have 10 units. I now have 110. Okay, so in base 5, I don't have 5 units. I have 4 units, but when it gets to 5, it becomes then a rod because it puts together once it gets to that base. So I could write numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4 base 5, 2, 1, 0, 3 base 5, but I can't have a number like 4, 9, 2, 3 base 5 because 9 is not a digit that's represented in base 5. Okay, so make sure you see the difference in that. Digits only go up to 4 in base 5. Alright, so now let's go back here to a clean sheet and do 22 base 10, and I want to convert it to base 5. Okay, so to do that, I can do a couple of different ways, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways for each thing because for some people the division method is easier, and for some people looking at powers of whatever it is that we do is easier. So when we talk about base 5, let's make a list of powers of base 5. So 5 to the 0 power is 1. 5 to the first power is 5. 5 to the second power is 25. And 5 to the third power is 125. If I need to go larger than that, I can do that. All I'm doing is multiplying the number before times 5 to get the next one. So 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. In other words, I'm multiplying by 1 more 5. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out and I'm going to do division. Okay? I'm going to start out with the number that I have to begin with. Now, let's look at this. Let's look at the powers of 5. The largest one that will go into 22 or divide into 22 would be 5. Alright, so I'm going to put that down. And out next to it, I'm going to write down that that represents 5 to the first power. Okay, so I don't forget that. And then I'm going to do normal division. 5 won't go into 2. 5 into 22 goes 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtract and get 2. So this is 4, remainder 2. Now I'm interested in the remainder because then I'm going to do another division. And I'm going to always take that remainder each time that I'd go to the next piece. Alright, so now let's look back over here at my powers of 5. What's the largest one that will divide into that 2? And that would be 1. Alright, so I'm going to divide that and I'm going to write down 5 to the 0. Now, you'll see why that's important in just a minute. Alright, so let's see. 1 divides into 2 2 times. 2 times 1 is 2. Remainder 0. Once I get here, I'm finished. I go till I have a remainder of 0. Then once that's done, then I write my place value. I have 5 to the 0 power. I have 5 to the first power. So 5 to the 0 power, I have 2 of those. And 5 to the first power, I have 4 of those. So 22 base 10 is equal to 42 base 5. Very simple conversion. Okay, let's double check that and see if it's really true. Okay, so 42 base 5, I can convert that back to base 10 just simply by doing the math right here that's represented. So I could write this as, start with the largest at the top because I think it makes everything line up easier when we're doing the addition. So this is 4 times 5 to the first power, and 2 times 5 to the 0 power. Okay, now let's do the math. So 5 to the first power is 5, so I really have 4 times 5, which is 20. 5 to the 0 power is 1, so I really have 2 times 1, which is 2. And I'm going to put that under the correct place so I can line up my digits to do my addition. Now, all I'm going to do is add all these up, and I have 22. So I can work back and forth. I can identify this just like I would have done in base 10. Now, this is the first way to do it, just using the division method. Now, the second method is the same way, except it's thought more of as divisibility. It's using the division algorithm. Okay, so the division algorithm says, let's start out with the first piece, and we're going to do 5 divided into 22. So if I were doing this by longhand, I'd do 5 into 22, and it goes 4 times. So I have 4 remainder 2. So I write that down, equals 4 remainder 2. Okay, now then I take this number and it moves to the divisibility place. In other words, 5 divides into 4, or 4 divides by 5, and I get that goes 0 times. In other words, 5 won't go into 4. And you probably need to do the division just so you see what happens. The 4 goes under the division bar and 5 goes outside. So it won't go, so it would go here as 0, and then 5 times 0 is 0, and then I have remainder 4. I keep doing the division algorithm here until I get down to 0 with some remainder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it down left to right based on bottom to top. So I'm going to write down 4 first and then 2. So it looks exactly the same. Okay? It looks exactly the same. This is still in 5 to the 0 place. This is still in 5 to the first place. So we have exactly the same thing. Okay? Now, what I want you to do now is I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try to do 129 base 10 and change it to base 5. Okay? So again, at this time, pause the video, and you take the time you need to work the problem, and then you can start the video again, and I'm going to work the problem out for you. Okay, did you get 1004 base 5? If you did, you're correct. If you didn't, let's see what you did wrong. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to take 129, I'm sorry, and we're going to have to divide it by the largest multiple or the largest power of 5 that goes into it. So let's make our table. 5 to the 0 is 1, 5 to the second is 5 to the first is 5, 5 to the second is 25, 5 to the third is 125. Okay, I don't need to go on to 5 to the fourth power because it's just a little bit larger than this one. So this is going to be the largest power that goes into it. So I have 125, which is, I've not left enough space over there, so I'm going to write it over here. 5 to the third power. Alright, so 125 into 129 goes one time, then 1 times 125 is 125, and I subtract and get 4. Okay, then I'm going to write down my remainder underneath. Now, what goes in here? So it's 1, which is 5 to the 0 power. So 1 into 4 is 4. 4 times 1 is 4. Remainder 0. Okay, so now I've got a 5 to the 0 and 5 to the third. Now remember, in place value, you have to represent all of them. So we need to go up to 5 to the third power. So let's start at 5 to the 0, 5 to the first, 5 to the second, 5 to the third. Alright, so now in the 5 to the third place, I have a 1, and in the 5 to the 0 place, I have a 4. Well, you know, in place value, when you don't have anything to go in a place, you represent what's there by zeros because you have to hold that place. Alright, so I have 1004 base 5. Now, let's double check it. Alright, so let's convert it back the other way. So to do that, all I have is 1 times 5 to the third, 0 times 5 to the second, 0 times 5 to the first, and 4 times 5 to the 0. Okay, so 5 to the third power is 125, so I have 1 times 125, which is 125. I have 0 times 5 to the second, which is 25, and 0 times anything is 0. And I have 0 times 5 to the first, which is a 5, so 0 times 5 is 0 again. And then in the last one, I have 4 times 5 to the 0. And 5 to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is 1. So 4 times 1 is 4. Now, when I add those up, 5 plus 4 is 9. Bring down my 2, bring down my 1. So I work back the other way and get that this number really is 129 base 10. And that is base 5 simplified.